Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. Want to improve your organization's customer service? Looking for insider tips to knock your customer socks off? Then you're in the right place. Here's your host, Yannick Grant.
Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. On today's episode, our guest is Matt Young. Matt is the CEO of UserVoice, the first, and we think best, product feedback and research tool for software companies around the world. Matt started his professional career as a software developer right when web browsers were released. He developed innovative solutions on the web well before SaaS and Product Management were the ubiquitous terms that they are today. Over his career, he has pushed for better ways to build software. And through all the changes in development methodologies, he has put the customer at the center of everything his teams have built. This is what attracted him to UserVoice, an opportunity to make sure that teams building complex software solutions have direct access to the intended users, to make sure that the problems any company or development team are solving are actually worth solving. So without further delay, sit back, plug your earphones in, and let's jump right into this conversation with Matt. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Yannick. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Okay, now even though we read a little bit about our guest, there's a formal bio that's submitted, of course, that we asked for, but we always like to give the guests an opportunity to share in their own words how they got to where they are today. Could you share a little bit about your journey with our listeners in your own words?
Oh, sure. And I think, I had a pretty ordinary software development career, starting off as an individual software developer and then moving into management. The thing that I had experienced while doing all that was that I would notice that product teams would ask engineering teams, which are big and expensive and complicated, to build things and didn't really have a good way to justify the reasoning behind that. I was really interested in hearing why customers thought what we were being asked to build was important, why it was an important problem to solve, why the solution we had in mind was a good one for them. I just was really passionate about companies being connected to the users that they serve. So that's kind of what brought me to UserVoice. I started out as the VP of engineering at UserVoice, but over the years, we've spun out a couple of other products into other companies. So the original founder is now the CEO of a sister company of ours that's working on some parallel products. And UserVoice is mine to run and build, and all the responsibility and fun that comes with that.
All right. Now, could you tell us a little bit about UserVoice? To the average listener that's listening to this podcast, a little bit about the company, what does the company do, and what types of businesses do you primarily service?
Sure. So UserVoice is a software as a service product, and it's all oriented around making sure that you can gather any feedback that comes your way about your product, and that feedback is available to the entire organization and can be analyzed and used to make products better. So you guys have probably seen somewhere in your professional lives a place where you had the opportunity to tell a team how they could make their product better, and that's evolved over the years in the way that happens. There are annoying ways to do it, like with pop-up windows, and there are really common ways to do it, like with surveys. But whether you've got a system in place or not, like people are providing feedback all the time. They're doing that in the middle of a sales demo, for example. They're saying what they do and don't like about the product they're showing. They're doing that through support tickets by asking about a thing they want to try to accomplish that may not be supported yet. So UserVoice, the product, makes it really easy for anyone who's in any position to hear customer feedback, either an employee of the company in support, sales, or success, or the customers themselves, have the ability to send whatever it is that's worrying them to the company, and then gives the product team the ability to aggregate what is usually a pretty big mountain of data into something that helps them relate their product development plans to the goals that the company currently has. So the short story is we're a software as a service product, but it's a business analysis tool that's built around product feedback.
Got it. All right. Now, one of the things I was intrigued in getting your feedback on is, do you think customers should be driving the product roadmap?
That's a question that we get asked quite a bit. And I think that the funny thing about that is that a lot of the traditional, like stereotypical personality type of a product manager is a very creative type person. And I think they can feel a little bit threatened by saying, hey, your customers should drive your roadmap. And they think, well, what about me? What about the innovation and creativity that we have to bring to bear? And I think it's a mistake to think of it as a black and white question. Like, should customers be driving a roadmap? No. Should companies be creating a roadmap without customer input? No. Neither one is quite right. They need to use each other to really understand each other and meet to find common ground about the real problems that they're trying to solve. So I basically view customer feedback as research inputs into a roadmap that's getting created. Not customers like actually prioritizing things and steering the ship directly, but they do have a lot of really valuable information for companies that can help them go to market with much greater success.
All right. Now, what about tips for improving feature request responsives?
I think the typical product manager is getting asked to do a lot of things. They're getting asked, by their coworkers to change the product to close a deal, for example. Customers obviously have a lot of input. One thing that really makes a lot of product managers nervous is the fact that they know that they need to say no to a lot of these things just because of resource constraints, or that what they're being asked for doesn't necessarily fit the vision of the company. But getting comfortable saying no to people, I think, is just a matter of being more transparent with them. The customers of software, especially these days, are getting more sophisticated in understanding how software is developed, how hard it is to make it perfect and do all the things that you want it to do. So I think transparency goes a really long way. So when you do get feedback about your product, acknowledging to people that you're listening, making sure that they feel valued and that the time they took to give you that feedback is something that you take seriously and find value in yourself. Acknowledging that is important, but then being very frank with, well, what's the process? What's going to happen next? I don't think most customers would expect, okay, great, we're going to go to work on this right away. That's not the way that software gets developed. But if you can explain to people like, hey, cool, thanks, I've made a note of this. We're going to talk about it with the team. We're going to keep our ears out for other customers like you who might need a similar kind of thing. And is it okay if we come back to you and have a conversation about this topic later when we decide to dig into it some more and get some more specific feedback from you about how your point of view has changed, about different solutions we're considering and all those things. So using customer feedback as an invitation to engage with a customer base, I think, is a really good way to look at it.
All right. Now, as it relates to product development, a lot of customers, I believe, have challenges sometimes trying to identify what's the right type of product that they may need for their business. Do you think the customer feedback is something, well, it's definitely something that you should get ongoing once you've actually sold the product or you've had an idea of what the design is going to look like and how it's going to affect the customer's life. But let's say you're at developmental stage where you're not sure exactly what the market needs. How do you gather feedback at that point?
Yeah, I think the best way to do that is through one-on-one interviews. And I think them being a one-on-one, I'd say in person, but more often than not, it's something like a Zoom call or a Skype call or something like that where you're talking to people. You want to get as high fidelity information as you possibly can from people, and that usually requires a conversation. Asking people to fill in a form. People are, it's kind of a boring activity. You can't ask follow-on questions, et cetera. And when you're just in that early stage of developing your product, you want to be able to interact with that customer and maybe observe how excited or indifferent they are about what you're building. Are they, just eager and jumping out of their seat at the opportunity to use something like what you're describing to them? Or are they, more middle of the road? Most people are very polite, so they're not going to tell you that it's a bad idea or anything like that. But they might not be excited about it, and that's a pretty good sign that you might not be onto something that's truly differentiated in the market for you. So yeah, I think we always say, until you have 100 or so customers, doing interviews in person and not getting software systems in the middle of that connection between you and a customer is really important to do. Where once you cross a threshold of 100 or so customers, you need to have systems that can scale because your time is limited and you couldn't possibly have conversations with every single one of them.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. So feedback, your whole solution is built around feedback, and I think feedback is so important. How is it that you handle dealing with some of your clients? Let us say, for example, here in Jamaica, I found that sometimes when organizations get feedback, whether it's in an electronic format or it is submitted to them, in a verbal conversation, sometimes the organizations get defensive and it comes over in their tone and their language.
Yeah. That's very true. Yeah. If you think about feedback, when was the last time you went out of your way to go tell someone they were doing a great job? Everything that you are doing in your product is awesome and I love it. Don't change a thing. That just doesn't happen, right?
True.
You might occasionally get a compliment about something they do like, but it's always going to come with something that people want to be different. So if you can, as a company who provides a product to people, get into the mindset that they're not judging you. They're not trying to tell you you've done a bad job. They're trying to express to you what problems they think you might be a partner to them and help solve are. And if you view it that way, then it's a whole lot less threatening. You're less likely to get defensive. It's never going to be all good news. It's mostly here are deficiencies that I think you have in your product and ways that it could be better. But don't take it that way. Take it to mean okay, these are opportunities that we have that are potential improvements that could not only benefit our business, but really benefit these customers and what they're trying to do in their lives. We get a lot of people who come to us who are pretty nervous about opening up the door to get feedback about their products because it does seem like a little bit of a bad news train that's going to come your way. Mm-hmm. But we always try to coach them that okay, well, would you feel better just doing this blind, fumbling around, building software, hoping that you're right? Or would you rather have actionable, real information from people, even if it is a little bit tough to take at times? And inevitably, when you think about it, I know I need the information. It's just, we've been working so hard and everyone's poured their hearts into it. And I don't know if I can take hearing all the ways that people don't like it, but it's okay. You'll get through it. We're all tough human beings, so it'll serve you well in the long run.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice. And it's good to know that even though you're an organization that's focused on feedback, you do offer some form of coaching with your clients to kind of get them in that mindset to change the perspective. Because you are correct. If you change your perspective and look on it as an opportunity, which, generally speaking, I don't think the customer would come back to give you feedback if they didn't want to continue using your product.
No, they wouldn't bother. The fact that they spared some time for you is a really good sign. Mm-hmm. It shows a degree of passion. As I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about the world's most successful companies. And you might, in your mind, say, well, they've got it made. They've got these huge customer bases. They're rolling in money. But if you think about their world, they have even more feedback coming their way that's even more critical, coming from all different directions in the world because they are so popular. So it never ends. Yeah. You're always going to get advice, either unsolicited or solicited, about how it could be better. So use it to your advantage. Make it a tool, not a threat.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. All right. Now, Matt, could you share with us what's the one online resource, tool, website, or app that you absolutely can't live without in your business?
I'll tell you the app. For me, it's Superhuman, the email client. We, like a lot of companies, when the pandemic started, shifted to working remotely. And so even more than ever, my world is driven by email. So having a very efficient system in place that drives the mountain of email that shows up in my inbox every day, mm-hmm. You can pry Superhuman out of my cold dead hands. And one of the things I like about Superhuman also is that they're very public about the way that they assess its value and build it. And Rahul Vora, who runs Superhuman, is a really interesting resource to look at from a product management perspective. So on two fronts, it's a great product, and the way that they work on it, I think, is really interesting.
All right. Awesome. So we will have the link to Superhuman in the show notes of this episode for those of our listeners that maybe are not using that resource currently that may actually benefit from that tool.
Oh, it will change your life. Yep.
All right. Can you also share with us, Matt, maybe one or two books that have had the biggest impact on you? It could be a book that you read a very long time ago, or even one that you've read recently that has really impacted you in a great way.
Yeah, I'll give you two, because there is one very old one that I read a long time ago, and there's one relatively newer one that I think is really important. The older one is an old favorite that I'm sure you've all heard of, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
My absolute favorite. I try to read it at least once per year.
Yeah, and the reason I like it so much is that I'm an introvert, and introverts are not shy. They're not afraid of social interactions or anything like that. But it drains energy to have a lot of interactions with people. And How to Win Friends and Influence People was really, to me, the beginning of understanding behavioral psychology. And learning how to do that on a person-to-person basis really set the foundation for thinking about how to build software products that speak to the psychological motivations behind what people do and don't do. Mm-hmm. So to me, it was kind of like the impetus to get started with what turned into a much bigger thing. So we study psychology to try to make sure that our products are really good too. And it's a very approachable thing, especially if you listen to the audiobook. Whoever they got to narrate it just feels like a warm blanket on a cold day. The guy's voice is great. The other one I'd recommend, it's along the same lines. There's a book by Yuval Noah Harari called Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. And it's this very interesting discussion about the evolution of mankind and the various phases that it's gone through in terms of, even going back to like cavemen, but looking at, the Iron Age, the Stone Age, all the different ages that we've gone through, and even more recent history. It looks at things like religion through the lens of all the different eras. There was a time in history where multiple gods was the norm, and in the days we live in today, one God is the norm. And by looking at things way zoomed out like this in humankind, you start to see the patterns of what changes and what stays the same with all of us over time. And it's just this fascinating, very unusual perspective on humankind that I thought was really interesting.
All right. Okay. So we will have the links to those books in the show notes of this episode for those of our listeners that would love to tap into those awesome resources. All right. Now, Matt, could you also share with us, and this is a bonus question. It wasn't in the conversation flow, but I feel like you'd give us an amazing answer.
Oh, now there's pressure. Don't do that to me. I just got through telling you I was an introvert.
So the question is, if you could choose the best customer service or customer experience tip to give to our listeners who are business owners, what would be the most important tip that you would give them to ensure that their business is successful?
I'm gonna say something that's a variation of like, make sure people aren't just a number to you. Mm-hmm. And to put that into very tactical terms, call people by their name and view them as an actual human being. If you're answering a support ticket, it's very easy to view things as an email that's coming through without a person behind it who's having an actual problem or having a good day or a bad day or frustration or excitement about what you're doing. But if you can always be visualizing the person behind it and the fact that they go beyond this relationship that you have with them about your product, and they are a human being that is just like you in terms of their hopes and dreams and fears and the lives that they lead, it's going to make you a much more empathetic provider of services, and that goes a really, really long way in the success of businesses.
All right. I love that tip. Be more human.
Yep.
All right. Now, Matt, could you also share with us what's the one thing that's going on in your life right now that you're really excited about? Either something you're working on to develop yourself or your people.
Yep. This is actually something I'm really, really excited about. We just switched to a 4-day work week.
Wow.
UserVoice did. And I think it's common in some areas of Europe, Scandinavia in particular, I think is kind of leading the way on it. But not a lot of American companies have tried this out. And I think that's born of a few things. It's conjecture on my part, but I think it's just lack of trust that a lot of companies have in their workforce, which I think is a huge mistake. But we're a relatively small company, and we try to be very experimental in what we do. And in doing so, we started a 4-day work week experiment about 6 weeks ago. And we laid out what our goals were. Our goals were concrete. We wanted to make sure that our output was just as good as it is with a 5-day work week, but we wanted to make sure that people had more time to pursue their lives outside of work. And it's been an epically good experience across the board. I've sent out a survey every 2 weeks since we started, asking people if they would continue if they had to decide today, and then asking about what some of the pros and cons have been. And people will tell you, like, my days are busy, but they're very engaging. And I feel like, this scarcity of time makes me choose my battles really carefully. And then one thing, as an example, a guy named Tori, who's a product manager on our team, he has date morning with his wife every Friday morning because the kids are at school, and his wife, Keatrice's favorite thing to do is to go have breakfast at a restaurant. And so they just do this every Friday. It's like my marriage is better, my connection to my wife is better, and I enjoy my job more. So this is something I think more companies should look into. It's been great for us.
I totally agree. Lovely, lovely. I love that. I really, really love that. I'm sure your employees must be totally excited that the organization is taking this leap forward, and you're doing it in a country or territory where it's not widely adapted as yet. Hopefully it will be eventually, as you had mentioned.
Yeah, I hope so too. I have a hard time imagining going back to a 5-day work week, and it's only been a month and a half after working professionally for 35 years.
Right.
Yeah.
It's almost like I've spoken to so many people that said that they don't know what it would be like to go back into the office. And here in Jamaica, you were kind of emerging out of the pandemic like a lot of other countries are. But there are a lot of organizations who they just can't see. And I think it's because they don't have the systems and tools in place, really. But they just can't see their business operating with their team members, majority of them operating from home. And some of them, in all honesty, really don't need to be in a physical space, in a building, in a business district area to come and get the job done. I think if they had the right productivity tools to kind of measure, and as you said, they were able to clearly identify what their goals are, and they're still able to achieve those goals with their team members working from home, it's very doable.
Yeah, it does take trust on the part of the leadership of the organization, that you've hired the right people, and that, a lot of companies say this, but I think a lot of companies, it's lip service that, I don't care what you do as long as you get your work done. Mm-hmm. There are other companies that, if they find out, I took an hour-long walk at lunch because I wanted to, they might get judgy about that. Which, why? If you're getting good stuff done, it doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, I agree. It's very similar to the remote versus office problem, and I don't need to watch someone work to know that they're doing a good job. I want to see the results of what they do.
Indeed. All right. Now, Matt, can you also tell our listeners, they've listened to this episode, they were quite intrigued with UserVoice and all of the great nuggets and insights that you shared with us today, and they would like to follow you online, they'd like to follow you on your journey, and maybe even connect with you. Where can they find you online?
Sure. I think LinkedIn is the best place to grab me professionally. And since my name is common, Matt Young, if you search for Matt Young and UserVoice, you should find me that way. You're also welcome to email me. It's just Matt, M-A-T-T, @uservoice.com. We are a company that encourages feedback. So if you have any thoughts on anything that we've said, it would be kind of hypocritical to not want that. We're welcome to. And I always say that half of what we do is produce software, and the other half of what we do is study the business that we're trying to write software to help. So any conversation that we have, whether you're interested in being a customer or not, is really valuable to us.
Yeah. Amazing. And you have to walk the talk, because if you're promoting the solicitation of feedback, then you definitely need to ensure that you're living up to those words yourself.
Yeah, you do. I mean, it really helps us relate to the fears and worries that our customers might have by going first through all of that ourselves. And it ideally makes us more credible, less hypocritical, and a lot more relatable.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. All right, Matt, before we wrap our interviews up, we always like to ask our guests, do you have a quote or a saying that during times of adversity or challenge, you'll tend to revert to this quote? It kind of helps to get you back on track if for whatever reason you got derailed or you got off track.
I don't have a quote. I think my mind just doesn't work that way. People ask me about like people I follow and all that stuff. I tend not to do that. I tend to just assimilate my worldview into something that is influenced in small and big ways by all the different things I read or all the different people that I interact with. Mm-hmm. But I think that the most important thing that I try to keep in mind, especially these days, it was highlighted by the pandemic happening, is that your life is not your job. To me, the most important thing is the positive impact that you have on the earth in the time that you're here, most specifically the people around you. So I don't want to use I grew up outside New York City, so sometimes my language can be colorful, so I won't say it, but don't be a you-know-what is
Got it.
the thing that drives me all the time. Other people are just as stressed as you are. They're less privileged than you are. Like, just have a bit of empathy for them.
Yeah. That is a powerful word, empathy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for hopping on our podcast today and sharing all of this great information, all these insights, a little bit about UserVoice, the importance of feedback and why it's so critical to kind of get that information from your clients or prospective clients. And as you mentioned, be open and look on it as an opportunity to improve rather than as a threat, because at the end of the day, as you mentioned, if they didn't want you to improve, they wouldn't have taken the time to give you the feedback in the first place. So I think that was definitely one of the most powerful things that you said in this conversation. I just really want to extend our gratitude to you for taking time out of your day and sharing those wonderful things with us.
Oh, thanks very much. This was a lot of fun.
I thought it was fun too.
Yeah.
Just want to remind our listeners, you can follow us on Twitter at NavigatingCX, and feel free to join our private Facebook group, Navigating the Customer Experience Community. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant. We also have a new book available on Amazon, The ABCs of a Fantastic Customer Experience. It's available in ebook and paperback. So if you want to increase revenue in your organization, build a stronger service culture, and create employees or develop employees who are really mastering service delivery in your business, you need to grab a copy of this book. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant.
Thanks for listening. For more awesome resources to take your customer service game to another level, head over to navigatingthecustomerexperience.com. See you next time.